Like I said, we're going to start right away because we do have a lot of information, and I wanted to welcome everyone to today's trading call webinar. We're really glad that everybody could join us today. We do have a lot of great information to share. Some of it will be familiar, but you need to watch and listen closely because there are changes and there's new information everywhere today. So listen closely. First, we will be talking about assessing family and household sizes. Then we're going to move on to determining income. And after our 7th inning stretch, we will talk about changes to policies and forms. As you can tell from the agenda, we have 3 separate times where you will be able to have any of your questions answered. First up, we will have our leadoff pitcher and training coach, Maite Gonzalez. She will lead off pitching, explaining how to determine household size and income for WIC. She has just learned a few new changeup and curveballs to try out on us. Erica Arter, our fastest base runner, pitch runs as several different players. Listen close and you'll hear from her periodically. Jackie Johnson as catcher will keep the team on track, calling and narrating the pitches, while collecting fly balls and questions that are submitted. In the interest of time, we will be fielding questions during the breaks, including our 7th inning stretch, and again at the end of the game. Or Marge Blankenship will be our cleanup pitcher, discussing some new policies and procedures, and some updated forms in the certification area. You will notice her procedures are sporting their new uniform design. Jane DeCamp will play briefly as our designated hitter to discuss an updated procedure in her area as well. She was playing in the outfield. He's watching carefully for each connected swing and making adjustments as necessary to technical equipment to keep our presentation running smoothly. Our next slide gives 2 tips you can use during our call. First, you can press *6 on your phone to mute and unmute. Again, unmute your phone during the question and answer times. The second tip shows how you can type in questions during the question and answer times, or if you think about a question and you're afraid you won't remember it, you can type it in at any time and it will be there and we'll see it, and then we can answer those during the time. And first we're going to start. Jackie's going to start us out with a general description of families. Jackie?
As we all know, WIC families come in all different shapes and sizes. We see many different types of families in our WIC clinics every day. The makeup of the family affects how we determine the family or the household size and assess the income for each. For WIC purposes, it might be helpful to think about the different types of families WIC serves. First of all, we have our traditional WIC family, which is one family living under one roof. This would be children living with their parents or their significant other. This might be a married couple who are expecting or having children. It could be a boyfriend and a girlfriend living together who have a child or are expecting a child. It could even be a same-gender couple who has adopted a child. A traditional family includes all persons living in the house in the family size, and it counts the income of all family members in the family as income for that family. WIC also sees many non-traditional families every day. A non-traditional family is when we have more than one family living under the same roof. This could also present itself in different ways. It could be something like 2 sisters living together, maybe a teen living with their parents, or 2 or more families sharing a house. And we all know that figuring income and family size is a lot more complicated for WIC when we have more than one family living in the same house. In the non-traditional family, the family is living with someone else besides or in addition to their children or their significant other. So how do we look at these situations? How do we look at these situations when there's more than one family living under the same roof? First of all, we need to determine if they are considered an individual family or a combined household for WIC purposes. Our WIC training coach, Maite Gonzalez, will explain more on how to do this.
Okay, like I said, we'll start reviewing how to determine the size of families and combined households. Individual families and combined households are related or non-related individuals living together as an economic unit, and they share income. It's important to determine the size correctly in order to determine income eligibility. And remember to count the unborn in the family size. Now, this is a new change made by USDA. In order to be an individual family, the family must have a source of income, and that income must be adequate to sustain the economic unit. There is no set amount of money that determines adequate income. Adequate income can vary from situation to situation. Now, some potential income sources families may have are monetary compensation, such as wages, salary, commissions, or fees, net income from farm and non-farm self-employment, Social Security and disability benefits, public assistance or welfare payments that include SNAP, subsidized housing, energy assistance, ADC, or Medicaid, unemployment compensation, alimony or child support, regular contributions from persons not living in a household, private pensions or annuities, net royalties, other cash income such as withdrawals from savings, investments, and trust accounts. Adequacy of income, not whether someone receives any in-kind benefits, is the determining factor for individual families. So what's not counted as a source of income? In-kind benefits. In-kind benefits are not counted as a source of income. This includes benefits from monetary value received in place of money for services rendered. And some examples of in-kind benefits include housing, utilities, vehicles, food and gas that are provided by or paid by the employer. Now, this is a new change from USDA regarding in-kind services when multiple families live together. In-kind services such as daycare, nanny services, or cooking and cleaning in exchange for housing and food does not make the client an individual family, because they aren't actually paying for their own basic living expenses, and there is no money being exchanged. So for example, a teen living at home babysits, and in exchange, her parents let her stay at home for free. This would make the teen a combined household with her parents. So you would need to count everyone in the household size and all the income, including the parents. And here's another change. USDA guidance for determining individual families says that income must be adequate to pay for basic living costs, and Nebraska has determined that basic living costs to be adequate income to pay for your housing, for example rent, which may or may not include utilities, and your food. These were chosen because these are the very basic things that one would have to survive on our own. And just as a reminder that the most important rule when determining individual or combined family status is to be an individual family, they must have their own source of income, and they must use that to pay for their housing and food expenses. Now this next slide defines what is considered an individual family versus a combined household. When multiple families are living together, you will need to determine if they are an individual family or a combined household to accurately determine the household size. Individual families must use their own source of income to cover basic living expenses, which are food and housing. And combined households receive support from others living under the same roof to cover these basic living expenses, which are food and or housing. Now here's a tool to help you obtain more information about who in the household is paying for the basic living expenses, which are housing and food. It was designed to be participant friendly and help the clerk to not have to ask so many personal questions, which can sometimes be uncomfortable for the client or clerical staff. When using this tool to determine household size, you can show it to the client and ask them to tell you more about how they pay for the top two items pictured on this chart. Remember, you can you also want to make sure that they have their own source of income. The bottom 3 circles were added to help you gain more information about how a client pays for things if they have no money coming in. We will discuss how to use the bottom 3 circles later in the webinar. Next up, we will go through the steps to determine individual families versus combined households. First, you want to ask how many people live with you, including family, friends, boyfriend, or girlfriend. If they just give you a number of people living with them and do not specify who the people are, you may need to ask a follow-up question such as, does that include anyone besides you, your children, and significant other? If you determine they are a non-traditional family, meaning they are living with someone besides their children and significant other, show the client the circle chart and have the client explain who pays for food and housing. You want to determine if the client is an individual family or a combined household. So if the client is paying for their own food and housing, then they would be in an individual family. If someone else is paying or helping them pay for their food and or housing, they would be a combined household. After you determine the number of people in a household, proceed with the income path assessment questions as usual. Now this is a slide that you can use as another tool to help you out when you're trying to determine household size. It gives examples for individual families. Some examples of individual families are clients that pay for their own food and housing, client that shares living expenses equally with others, homeless, which means a lack of fixed nighttime residence or living in a shelter, students living at school paying for their own food and housing, and for their income, count only the income for the individual family. Some examples of the combined households are other people paying for the client's food and or housing, money that is combined and expenses are paid for, usually they're not paying equal amounts, living permanently with others and not paying for their own food and or housing, the student that's living at school and someone else is paying for the student's food and or housing, the foster child or teen that has been adopted. For their income, you want to count all the income for this combined household. And this third column shows another category, which is household of one, as household of one would be a foster child under the age of 5 or a foster teen. And remember that foster teens will always be a household of one, even though they may be pregnant. For their income, count only the money received from the state and any money the foster teen may have coming in. Now, the most common question that we get in training clinic is, what do you do when parents of teens do not want to give their income information when their pregnant teen applies for WIC? In this case, we would not be able to enroll the pregnant teen without the parent's income information, so we must count the parent's income unless that you determine the pregnant teen is an individual family. Remember, teens to receive Medicaid are automatically adjunct eligible for the program, and you could then just take a verbal amount for the parent's income. And speaking of teens, you want to remember to have them fill out the statement of status. The statement of status is a form that must be completed by pregnant and postpartum teens under the age of 19. The answers on the statement of status have no impact on family size for WIC. The statement of status is for legal purposes to determine who is responsible for repaying WIC when we have to make a claim. By Nebraska law, teens under age 19 are still minors, so for WIC claims or fraud purposes, the parents would be responsible for paying WIC. And this is just an example of what the statement of status form looks like. And moving on, how do we determine household size when children are living in another home? On this slide, this will help you make a decision regarding this. If starting on the left, if the client has full custody of a child living in another home, you want to count the child as a part of the household that has custody. If the client shares or has joint custody of a child living in another home, then this child can only be counted in one household. And in these cases where clients are sharing custody or have joint custody, it's up to the parents to decide which household the child would be counted on. If the client is caring for a child in the absence of a biological parent, for example, abandonment, mom's in jail, or in rehab, etc. Count the child as part of the household that child is living at. If the client helps pay support for a child living in another home, do not count the child as part of the household. Okay, so now using the information we have given you so far in the webinar, follow along the next few scenarios that will put this information into practice. Please pull out that circle chart we gave you before to use as you follow along.
Now we're going to go over a couple of scenarios to demonstrate how to assess household size. First up, we have Randi Brentz, who has a 1-month-old baby named Max. Let's listen in on the assessment.
Okay, Randy. Next, we need to gather some information about your household. How many people live with you, including any family, friends, or boyfriend?
Well, it is me and my son Max, and we live with my parents. So I guess that makes 4.
Okay. Can you tell me who in your household pays for these 2 top items pictured on the chart?
Sure. I give my parents $200 per month to live at their house, and they make me buy my own food for myself and Max.
So it sounds like you have a job.
Oh yeah, I work at the mall 3 days per week.
So for WIC, Randy and Max would be their own individual family with 2 people, her and baby Max. She has her own source of income by working at the mall. She pays her parents for housing, and she buys her own food. Since she meets all 3 requirements, she would be an individual family, and we would not include her parents as part of the household.
Next up, we have Pam Pizza and her 2-year-old son Eric. Let's listen in on the assessment to determine their household size.
Okay, Pam. Next, we need to gather some information about your household. How many people live with you, including any family, friends, or boyfriend?
Well, right now Eric and I are living with my sister until I save up some money for my own place. So counting my sister, that would make 3 people living with us.
Okay. Can you tell me who in your household pays for these top 2 items pictured on the chart?
My sister and I have worked out that I will buy food for myself and Eric since she is letting us stay there for free.
In this scenario, Pam would be a combined household of 3, Pam, her son Eric, and her sister. She has her own money, which she states she uses to pay for food, but her income is not adequate to cover her basic living expenses, and her sister pays for the housing. Since she does not meet all 3 requirements, Pam is a combined household with her sister.
Our next household size scenario is Candy Cash and her 2 sons, Chance and Casey. Let's listen in on the assessment of their household size.
Okay, Candy. Next, we need to gather some information about your household. How many people live with you, including any family, friends, or boyfriend?
4. Me, my boyfriend, and Chance and Casey.
Okay, and actually, since you're pregnant, we would count your unborn baby, so that would make 5.
In this scenario, Candy Cash would be an individual family of 5 people. Candy, her boyfriend, Chance, Casey, and the unborn baby. They are a traditional family for WIC purposes, so we would count all family members and all the income that's coming in. We do not need to proceed with the circle chart since there is no one else living with Candy besides her kids, and significant.
In this scenario, we will listen in to a household assessment for a client who is using assistance programs. We have Betty Benefits and her 3 children, Ben, Brianna, and Brett.
Okay, Betty. Next, we need to gather some information about your household. How many people live with you, including any family, friends, or boyfriend?
1, 2, 3, 4. 4. It is just myself and the kids.
Betty would be an individual family of 4 people, Betty, Ben, Brianna, and Brett. They are a traditional family for WIC purposes, so you would not need to continue with the circle chart. We would count all family members and all income that's coming in. Now let's say Betty is living with others in a non-traditional WIC family. In this case, you would want to use the circle chart.
Can you tell me who in your household pays for these top 2 items pictured on the chart?
I get subsidized housing for my apartment, and I get food stamps for our food.
Betty would still meet all 3 requirements of an individual family since she is getting housing and SNAP, and those would also count as her source of income, so she would be in an individual family from others that may be living with her under the same roof, besides herself and her children.
Next up, we will assess household size when someone does not have a permanent residence. Let's listen in on the assessment of household size for Henry Homeless and his daughter Heather.
Okay, Henry. Next, we need to gather some information about your household. How many people live with you, including any family, friends, girlfriend?
Well, that is a good question. That is kind of hard to answer. This week, my daughter and I are staying with my friend from school. Last week, we stayed with my cousin. We just moved here after I lost my job in California. So this week, I guess it would be three, me, my daughter, and my friend.
Okay. Sorry to hear about that. I'm sure that makes it difficult to pay for the bills. Can you tell me how you're paying for these top 2 items listed on the chart?
Well, since I don't have a job here yet, my friend is letting us stay there for free for this week. I've been getting food from food pantries for me and my daughter. If I don't find a job soon, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Okay, Henry. For WIC, we will just count you and your daughter as an individual household. Since this is a temporary residence, this would make your household of 2. I can get you some information about applying for Medicaid and SNAP. Would you be interested in information on places to help you find a job in our community?
Yes, that would be great.
Now, this situation is a little bit different. Henry and his daughter, Heather, would be an individual family of 2, even though he does not meet the 3 requirements for individual families. He just lost his job, so he has no income. His friend is providing him with housing this week, and he does not have adequate income to purchase his own food. But if you refer back to slide 20, you will see homeless or lacking a fixed nighttime residence is listed as a special situation in which clients are still their own individual family.
Our next scenario describes how to determine household size when someone is providing a service in exchange for housing or food. Let's listen in to the assessment for Kelsey Kindly, a pregnant mom.
Okay, Kelsey. Next, we need to gather some information about your household. How many people live with you, including any family, friends, or boyfriend?
Well, it is just me, and I live with my parents.
Okay. For WIC, we also count your unborn baby as part of the household, so that would make 4. Can you tell me who in your household pays for these top 2 items pictured on the chart?
I clean my parents' house in exchange for living there since I am going to school full-time and do not work. They also buy all of the food.
In this scenario, Kelsey would be a combined household of 4. Kelsey, her unborn baby, and both of her parents. As you can see, Kelsey does not meet all 3 requirements of being an individual family. She's going to school full-time, so she does not have her own source of income. She's cleaning her parents' house in exchange for housing and food. Remember, this is a change. Slide 14 shows that in-kind services, such as cleaning in exchange for housing and food, no longer make Kelsey an individual family from her parents. Now, in the case of Kelsey Kindly, if her parents were paying her to clean their house and Kelsey was then paying them for food and housing to live at their home, then Kelsey and the unborn baby would be an individual family of 2. Her parents would not be included as part of the household.
Thanks, Maite. You've been working really hard showing all of those new pitches. I think now would be a good time for questions. If you haven't yet, it doesn't look like we have questions that have came in yet. I've kind of been checking as we've gone along. But go ahead and type in any questions that you have in that where it says Q&A at the top and press Ask. And we're going to take a really short break and try to monitor those questions, pull them together, and take a few minutes to try to answer those. That's where anybody that's following along on the webinar, we would encourage you to type those questions in there. If you're not following along on the webinar and you're only on the phone, we will be taking phone questions after that. So again, we're muting our line to pull these questions together. Feel free to take a 1 or 2 minute break if you need to. Okay, the first one says, what do you do with a family when there is a dad and his wife and girlfriend that all live together and have 9 children and they live together as a family unit? The mother and girlfriend are both on WIC, so do we count each mom and her children as an individual family, even though they live together as one family unit?
For assigning ID or family ID numbers, you have two responsible parties there, so you would have them each be a responsible party. But when you're assessing income, you would look at the entire unit. You would look at mom, the girlfriend, the dad, and all 9 children. And you would use all the income coming in as one. You would look at the income and the family size as one family unit. So in this situation, you would have 2 different ID numbers because you have 2 different responsible parties who are the parents of however the children are, I guess, distributed between them. But for income purposes, they would have the same income and the same family size. You would be counting everybody.
All right, next question. Is a college student paying housing and food with financial aid considered an individual family?
Yes, they are, because the financial aid, and we'll talk about this later, the financial aid counts as their income. It's their source of income.
All right, next question. Why don't we count the unborn in a foster teen?
Federal WIC regulations and say that foster teens or foster children are counted as one, a family of one. So therefore, it doesn't matter whether they are a teen or it's a child, a baby, or a child under 5. They're still a family of one.
Section of the statement of status, we were under the impression it was for under age 18.
The statement of status is for 18 and under. That might be where the confusion came in. It's age 18 and under, because by Nebraska law, you're a minor until you turn 19. So the statement of status is for any teen that's 18 or younger.
Next question. Since subsidized housing and SNAP benefits count as proof of adequacy of income with the new guidelines, do we need to enter those amounts in the income field in the computer?
Okay. No, you wouldn't, because we're not necessarily going to know the amount for the subsidized housing, and we may not know the amount for the SNAP. They count as their source of income, but they really don't, for WIC purposes, have any monetary value, so we wouldn't enter an amount into the computer system in the income field. That's a really good question. Okay, we have one more.
It says, can you clarify, slide 45, Erica? It says, if living with parents and is being done for chores. Can you clarify, slide 45, if lives with parents and is being done and is being paid for chores? Does this make her an individual household?
If she's being paid for chores and she's in turn paying her parents to stay there, and that amount is, a reasonable cost of, for rent or food, then yes, she would be an individual family. The key is, with the new change, is that they have to be paid, and then they in turn have to pay for their rent or food or both to be staying where they're staying. They cannot do babysitting or nanny services or cleaning or anything like that with no cash or no money being exchanged. That's the biggest change. So we have a lot of our teens, we have a lot of people that might be living with someone, and they've been in the past, it's been okay that they could do those services, and then they would be considered an individual family or a family of their own, and that's just, we can't do that anymore. That's not allowed. They have to be paid, and they in turn have to pay for their rent, or even if it's the person that they're giving the rent to, the money for the rent, they just basically have to get the money and turn around and give it back in some cases. But cash or money has to change hands.
Okay, last question here that we have typed in says, when did we start using the statement of status again? we were told a couple of years ago that we no longer needed to use them.
We've been using the statement of status for a long time, so if you don't have copies of that, let Kathy know and she can get you some. But we should be using it for all teens under the age of 19.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you everybody for those questions. Is there anybody on the phone line that isn't able to submit online that has a question? We can take those now at this time as well.
Have any?
We have a quick question.
Okay.
18 or 19 for the statement of status.
You cut out. Can you repeat that? We didn't catch all of it.
Is it 18 or 19 years old for the statement of status?
The statement of status needs to be filled out for anyone who is under the age of 19. So that means 18 and younger. The day they turn 19, they are considered an adult under Nebraska law, and we do not need to have the statement of status filled out.
Okay.
Is that
Thank
okay?
you.
All right. Good. Good questions. Thanks. Anybody else have a question?
I have a question.
Okay.
So, if we have a foster child, a teenager, and then she is pregnant, how do we do that?
She's a family of one, irregardless as if she's pregnant.
Okay, and then after she has the baby, and the baby is considered a foster child, they're both.
They're
both family?
each a family of one.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. As long as the baby's a foster child.
Okay, it looks like there's one last question.
Okay, well,
if they receive subsidized housing and SNAP and enter zero income, can we still use zero income for the next CERT period?
if they're getting SNAP and the housing, and you enter zero for this certification period, and then they're getting subsidized the next, I think they
Nothing's
get
changed.
nothing changes, and they're getting SNAP and subsidized housing for the next cert period. Yes, it would be zero income, but I think you also should use the circle chart and ask, how are you paying for some of these other things? I mean, like, do they have a car? How are they getting where they need to go? How are they paying if they come walking in with a cell phone? How are they paying for their cell phone? Which almost, most of our clients do have those. And how are they paying for clothing? That would be a question. I think that would be a time when we'd want to ask some additional questions. There's also, and we'll talk about zero income here after a bit, so you'll get more information on that here in the next portion. Okay? So we're going to move on and start with our next session.
So switching gears a little bit, we're now going to go over some basic income information, the income assessment path, proofs of income, and how to properly determine zero income situation. So first off, we need to determine income eligibility for clients that apply for the WIC program. Now, to qualify for the WIC program, the clients must be
All callers are muted.
certain income guidelines that are set by USDA, or they have to qualify through one of the adjunct income eligible programs, which are Medicaid, Presumptive Medicaid, or Kids Connection, ADC, SNAP, or the 599 CHIP program. Now, these are the current income guidelines, which you're probably already familiar with. They became effective May 20th of this year. Remember, WIC income guidelines are 185% of the poverty level. Now, this slide defines some important terms that staff need to know when determining income eligibility. First off, gross income. That's the amount received for working before any taxes, insurance, or other deductions are taken out, and this includes overtime and bonuses. Net income is the amount left after all the deductions are taken out. This is the amount the person takes home. Current income, this is the income received in the past 30 days, and annual income is the amount received during the entire year. Next, we'll talk a little bit more about determining gross income. Now, in general, you do assess income based on what the family is receiving in the last 30 days. Use gross income, including overtime, before deductions for income taxes, employees' Social Security taxes, insurance premiums, bonds, etc. The amount of a household's gross income shall not be reduced for financial hardships, medical bills, or child support. Now we will discuss when to use net income. Net income is money received from self-employment after expenses are deducted. Use net income when someone is self-employed, such as farmer, rancher, crafts, hobbies. They may be selling Tupperware, Avon, they're a truck driver, they own their own business, or maybe babysitting. So for example, of when to use net income is if you have a truck driver who makes $4,000 a month but had to pay $2,000 for new tires, fuel, repairs, etc. After all of his expenses were made, he's left with $2,000 as net income for the month. Now, in order to complete an income assessment, you must follow the income assessment path. On the Nebraska WIC website, you may have printed off the new version of the income assessment path questions. It's very similar to the old income assessment path. A couple of the questions have been combined, and a little more guidance have been added to make it more user-friendly. I will point out any changes in the upcoming slides as we go through each income assessment question. So you may wonder, why do we have to ask all of these questions? Well, the WIC income assessment path was developed to improve the integrity of the income screening process, and it should be completed to ensure that all sources of income are considered. Also, it demonstrates that we apply the same rules for all applicants. Now, you want to complete a full income assessment using the income assessment path to all clients. Do this even when the client is adjunct income eligible, because we want to treat all the clients the same regardless of whether they receive Medicaid or other assistance programs. Now, the first question on the income assessment path has now been combined with the questions about self-employment. The next few slides provides guidance on proofs of income you can take for working and self-employed. The first question reads, are you working for someone or are you self-employed? If working for someone, how often do you work? Proofs you're able to take are pay stubs for each job for everyone in the household. And you want to make sure to look at the gross income and at the pay intervals. Now remember, you cannot take a bank statement in place of a pay stub because the deposit would only show the net amount. Now, this shows what to look for when looking at a pay stub. You want to make sure it's dated in the last 30 days, and you also want to check the pay interval. So is it weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, etc.? If you're unsure, ask the client how often they get paid. And most importantly, look at their gross income. All pay stubs are a little bit different, so make sure you look at their gross income, not the net pay. If they say they are self-employed, such as farmer, rancher, babysitter, sell Avon, Tupperware, Tastefully Simple, home decor, pampered chef, candles, paper routes, or any other similar jobs, proofs you can take are the income tax statement, or the bookkeeping records. Make sure to use the net income, and this type of income may vary sporadically. You may have to average income. Now, when looking at the tax information for clients who are self-employed, you want to look at line 22, which is the net income after all their expenses have been taken out. And again, only use this line for self-employed. The second question asks, does anyone living with you work for someone, or are they self-employed? If working for someone else, ask how often do they work. And again, you can go ahead and take the pay stubs for each job for everyone in a household, look at their gross, look at the pay intervals, and remember, do not take the bank statement because that only shows a net amount. If someone else in the household is self-employed, again, go ahead and take the income tax statements or their bookkeeping records. Now we're going to continue with a series of questions for number 3. If the client says they are receiving Social Security or disability, and note that military disability has been included in this. If they're receiving this, proofs you can take are the award letter, a current bank statement, or a current online bank statement. If they're receiving pensions, annuities, or retirement checks, You can go ahead and take the letter or any current paper statement or online statement. If they're receiving unemployment, you can go ahead and take a bank statement. Now please note that clients can choose where they want their unemployment benefits deposited. They can be deposited in a bank account or on the blue Relia card. The number on the back of the Relia card only tells you what the balance remaining on the card is, so this cannot be used as proof of income. Clients are able to go online and use print screen to print the amount that was deposited to the current week. They also get a monetary determination letter in the mail that includes the date they will begin receiving unemployment and the amount they will receive each week. This could be used for proof of income. Now, if it has their name and address, it can also be used as proof of residency. If they do not have a computer, they can go to any workforce development office and use the computers and printers there for free. If the clients are receiving workers' compensation, proofs you're able to take are a current pay stub, or again, a current paper or online bank statement. If they receive child support or alimony, proofs you're able to take are the current bank statement showing the deposit, the divorce decree, or the silver Relia card. Now they can choose to have their money deposited in a bank account like I mentioned before, or loaded on this Relia card. For those with the card, you can call and get the date and amounts of the most recent deposits. This can be used as proof of income. They can also go online and see a monthly statement which can be printed out. Now there has been a change to inheritance and lottery winning. If the client receives inheritance, only count if it was received in the last 30 days. And you want to make sure to call the state if it's more than $15,000. For lottery winning, only count if they win $1,500 or more in the last 30 days. And once again, call the state if it's more than $15,000. Proofs you're able to take are a current bank statement or a statement from the probate estate settlement for the inheritance. Question number 4 reads, do you or anyone living with you receive money or financial support from parents, relatives, friends on a regular basis? If they do, you can accept a letter signed and dated by the person providing financial support stating the amount and how often. You can also take a copy of the check or a current bank statement showing the deposits. Now remember that under question number 4, routine substantial withdrawals from savings accounts should be counted as income, as well as routine scheduled payments such as trust accounts, education accounts, and interest payments. Proofs you're able to take are a current bank statement showing the withdrawals. Question number 5, do you or anyone else living with you receive money from any other source we have not already discussed? Remember at this point to count the money of ADC if they mentioned it to you before. Now, what if by the end of the income assessment they are not receiving ADC and have not answered yes to any of the income questions? You want to use that circle chart we used before to clarify how and who is paying for the items listed on the chart. Once again, you can use a circle chart as a way for clients to tell you more about how they're paying for all these items, picture on the chart, if they say there is no money coming in. This is more participant-friendly than asking them several questions that are very personal about their income and living arrangements. And there may be instances where clients may be a true zero income. They might have just lost or quit their job in the last 30 days. They just moved here from another state. Living arrangements just change. So for example, you have that dad left the house and now you have a stay-at-home mom and the children. They're living on student loans, they're in between jobs. So for example, they left the job on Friday and now they're starting another job on Tuesday. They may be on family medical leave, or they started a new job but have not received any pay yet. Now remember that even though they may be a zero income, they could still be getting Medicaid or be on another assistance program. This is how you would document zero income on the signature form. Just make sure to mark the zero box and write the specific reason why the client was determined to be a zero income.
thanks, Maite. It's now time for the 7th inning stretch, where we will make time for another 10 minutes of questions. Looks like it's about 1:56 right now. Wrapping up, we'll take questions you have on income assessment path as time allows. Foul balls landing outside of our ability to field them at this time will be answered later in an email or at the next game. All right, thank you, everybody. We have a few more questions that have came in. This first question, I think, actually came in the last time that we didn't. It came in right after we kind of went off the line, so we'll go ahead and answer it now. It is, why is an 18-year-old not classified as pregnant teen if they must complete a statement of status?
That's a really good question. We get that a lot, and it is kind of confusing. For WIC risk assessment, a pregnant teen is defined as someone who's 17 or younger. So once they turn 18, then they're no longer at risk as a pregnant teen. Nebraska's definition of an adult or a minor, you're not an adult in Nebraska until you turn 19. So 18-year-olds are considered an adult, a minor in the state of Nebraska. A lot of states' legal definition of an adult begins when you turn 18. Nebraska is one of the few that uses 19, and so we have that difference there. We have kind of that year where those 18-year-olds, they can't be counted as have a risk assigned as being having a nutritional risk assigned as a pregnant teen, but in Nebraska, they're still considered a minor until they turn 19.
When determining income from a pay stub, do we count a 403B employee retirement contribution? If you assess annual income from 1040, this would not count as gross income as it is re-tax contribution.
And you're right, it wouldn't be counted on the 1040. The government doesn't count that because it's pre-tax, but we look at that. WIC does not deduct any of those things out when we're looking at income. So when you're looking at a pay stub, you would count all of that. So you would look at their gross pay, which would include that. Their net pay is going to have that taken out on their pay stub. So you would look at the gross amount. Jackie's going to read the first question about financial aid.
Okay. Earlier in this slideshow, you said we count financial aid as income. Now the zero income slide states we do not count student loans as income. Please clarify.
Okay, there's different kinds of financial aid. If they're getting the student loan, like the Pell Grants, and the Pell Grants, which student work study is a form of a Pell Grant, those are exempted under federal regulations. We cannot count those as income. If they're getting student loans, as in a loan from a bank for school, we would not count. And they're using those to live on, to pay their rent and their food. Then we would count the portion that they are using to live on for rent, or to pay their rent or their housing and their food. But we would not count. We don't count Pell Grants. We don't count like work study because those are exempt.
Okay, last question. If we enroll a mom today and have her bring in a child to enroll the following week, do we need to see the child's proof of ID since it's within 30 days? Or do we need to see proof of income and residency again?
Because the child, even though it's within 30 days, you enrolled the mom and now you're enrolling the child. They are separate applications and they are separate people. So yes, you would need to see proof of ID, proof of income and residency for that child, because we don't, only when they're there the exact same day can you transfer or see it just once for everyone. But if it's at a different time, then you need to start all over because it's a separate individual application. Good questions.
Good questions.